for the regular board meeting for the Desert Water Agency on September 2nd, 2025 at 8 o'clock. Just some housekeeping for those of you that may be participating remotely. If you could mute your speaker while the meeting is in progress and until you're ready to speak at public hearing. And for those of us in the room, if you could mute your electronic devices. And for discussion and questions, I will call on directors in the following roll call order. Director Gracia, Director McKenna, Secretary Treasurer Bloomer, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega. And all votes will be conducted via roll call. And with that, we can move to item 2, which is our Pledge of Allegiance. And I would like to have Director Gracia lead us, if he wouldn't mind.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
I guess I screwed that up pretty good.
All right. So item 3 is our roll call. May we start with that, please?
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director McKenna,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
Present, and I just have a quick note if I get an emergency call. My dad's in the hospital, so if I have to step out.
Vice President Bowman.
Here.
And President Ortega, all present.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Item 4 is public comments for items not on today's agenda. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board about an item related to the business of the water agency, but not on today's agenda. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak, please come forward. We ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. And then as provided in the Brown Act, the board is prohibited from acting on items not listed on today's agenda. Ms. Baca, have we received any public comments ahead of time?
No comments have been received.
Okay. Seeing no members of the public coming forward, we can move to item 5, which is public comments on items that are listed on today's agenda. Again, please come forward if you have something you'd like to speak about regarding an item on today's agenda. And again, ask that you keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll move to item 6, which is our consent calendar. Items that are listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion of the board without discussion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member requests a specific item to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. And we have 2 items on today's consent calendar. Are these items something that a director would like to speak about separately? No, so I will look for a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented.
Move item 6.
All right.
Consent calendar as presented.
I'll second.
All right. We have a first from Director Gracia and a second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have the roll call vote?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We have an action item on our schedule today. It is 7A, request update to public events list and external meeting lists. General Manager Sines, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. So the item that we have today is, the background of it is at our August 14th Executive Committee meeting. We had a discussion regarding Chamber of Commerce events that are currently limited to a specific director and an alternate. And given that most chamber events are mixers and things of that nature and not what we would really consider a meeting being agendized and having items of business to discuss, it was suggested that the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce and the Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce events be moved to the external meetings list, from the external meetings list to the public events list under the business section. So it was also noted that when we were reviewing the listings that the Business Expo Taste of Palm Springs currently is specifically under the public events list, and the And it is a Palm Springs Chamber event, so by moving the Palm Springs Chamber events over to the events list, that would be encapsulated by that, and we don't need to double state it. So we are suggesting that that item be removed. And also, we were recently informed that the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership will be dissolving soon and will be deleted from the public events list, as they will no longer be having any events. For the fiscal impact, there is no fiscal impact as we do budget already for board attendance at meetings and events, and this will not change the maximum amounts allowed. And the recommendation is that staff recommends that Board of Directors approve the updated public events list and external meeting list. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Just to clarify, so essentially we're opening up both agents, both chambers events to all directors, is that right?
That is correct.
And, okay, so there's no guessing anymore. Good with that. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Then I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
All right, I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. I have a first from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer and a second from Vice President Bowman. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 8 is a discussion item. It is 8A, leak detection technologies and recommendations. And it looks like we'll start with Assistant General Manager and Chief Engineer, Mr. Tate.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. California Department of Water Resources website on urban water law states, drought and other water shortage issues highlight the need to manage water loss in the water distribution systems. Water loss can be the result of seepage, leaks, pipe failures due to aging infrastructure and errors in data, and water theft. Water utilities can increase water supplies and recover revenue by identifying the scale and cost of these losses. The Urban Retailer Water Suppliers Water Loss Management Bill, SB 555, adopted in 2015 during the drought, focused on addressing water loss in urban retail water distribution systems. SB 555 required suppliers to conduct annual water loss audits and submit validated reports to the Department of Water Resources. SB 555, I think I added a 5 there. Also called for the State Water Resources Control Board to adopt performance standards for water loss by 2020. The State Water Resources Control Board utilizes data from annual water loss reports, water loss audits to develop apparent and real water loss performance standards for each supplier using water loss economic framework model. Real water loss is one component of a water supplier's urban water use objectives, UWUO, developed under the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulation. The real water loss component is calculated by multiplying the real water loss performance standard by the total number of services connections in the distribution system. Water suppliers are required to comply with apparent and real water loss performance standards by January 1st, 2028. During the development of the economic model, water suppliers had the option of requesting deviations from default inputs to the model to better reflect system characteristics. For systems with less than 500 miles of pipe, the default leak survey frequency for a full system survey once every 2 years, approximately 17.5 miles per month for DWA system. In 2024, DWA requested a reduction in the leak frequency to 3.5 miles per month based on DWA not having the resources and staffing to focus solely on leak detection. To satisfy the State Water Resources Control Board requirements, DWA indicated its intent to begin annual leak detection surveys, which would cover 3.5 miles of pipe per month or 42 miles annually, approximately 10% of the water system. DWA identifies and repairs 100% of the leaks in our systems that have surfaced. However, another significant source of real water loss is subsurface leaks that we cannot see. Numerous leak detection methods and technologies exist to aid in identifying subsurface leaks within a distribution system. Staff prepared a presentation providing information on some of these leak detection technologies, methods employed by DWA, and recommendations for further leak detection efforts. This topic at DWA covers multiple departments, and it's conservation, engineering, and water resources. We've selected water resources to be the lead department on this program. And at this time, I'd like to invite Sarah Rapola, our water resources manager, to present the leak detection technology and recommendation presentation.
Good morning.
President Ortega, members of the board. Get this thing up and running here, and then we'll get started. Thank you, David, for providing the background information. While she's pulling up the presentation, the background's important because it tells you what leak detection, like where it fits in, right? So part of the components of that framework that went into developing the standards is active leak detection. And that's not just visual surveys, which we do already, right? That's also using other methods, which is why, as you'll see, we're starting to employ those acoustic surveys. So just a quick overview of our presentation today. We'll go through some of the leak detection methods and technologies that are out there. I will point out that I didn't include an exhaustive list of all of the technologies because some of them have limitations which don't make them very practical for our system. So we're really focusing on the ones that we could use. We'll go through the methods that we employ here at Desert Water. We'll do a quick summary of the inaugural leak detection survey that we performed last year. And then we'll go over a summary of our leak detection program as well as our recommendations for how we perform leak detection moving forward. And then we'll go ahead and open it up for questions at the end. So we'll start with those leak detection methods and technologies. There's a few different categories of leak detection technologies. First being acoustic, right? So listening based. The most basic method of acoustic survey is what we call ground microphones. Oh, I'm sorry, it went, there we go. Listening sticks. So that's really the most basic method. They're usually made from metal, wood, or plastic. In the case of what we use here at DWA, they're really long metal rods. You'll see that in a few photos, a few slides away from now. We use these listening sticks to audibly discern leaks on fittings, hydrants, or service connections. The way they work is that vibrations from the leaks pass through the pipeline, through that listening stick, and then you're able to hear it, right? So you can hear the sound that the leak's making. These are best used on small diameter metallic pipes, which is really a good part of what we have in our system. So this is an effective method for us to use. There are some limitations though. It's a very time-intensive process. As you can see in the photo, this gentleman is boots on the ground, right? So I mean, this involves walking the streets, putting your ear to the ground and listening for these leaks. And because of that, it's really limited coverage. You're limited by the amount of time that you have to perform this type of survey. I would say this is a glorified listening stick. So a ground microphone is really a listening stick with a battery-powered sound amplifier on the bottom. And you can see that in the photo right here. So it does allow you to use this for more than just metallic pipes. This type of ground microphone can be used on other materials like plastic pipes, also in low pressure environments and in areas where you might have noise interference, so other things going on, right? Whether it's a gas main or a pump or something like that. That amplifier is gonna allow you to hear the sound that's coming from the leak. As with the listening stick, this is a non-invasive approach minimal site prep because you're not excavating anything, really, you're just listening to the ground. Also very time intensive, however. And how effective this device is really dependent on the person that's using it, right? So you have to be able to discern the difference between the sound a leak makes and the sounds that you might be hearing from other background noise. Oh, goodness. It's like ultra sensitive. There we go. Okay, so even a little more advanced in the acoustic category is these leak noise correlators. So here we're using sensors that they put on 2 points within a stretch of pipe. So they might use valve cans, and they might set one sensor at point A, and then they might go over here to point B and put another sensor. The sensors pick up signals, right, from wherever that leak is located. They send that signal to a noise correlator, and then it kind of triangulates that location for the leak based on how long it takes the signal to travel from this sensor to the correlator. It's also non-invasive and minimal site prep because, again, we're using valve cans and things that we already have. They might use a hydrant or something like that. They're not excavating to do this work. Doesn't really work too well on plastic pipes. This is better suited for metallic pipes, which, again, is majority what we have. It does assume that you have a consistent pipe material and diameter, which we do have some parts of our system, the older sections, where you may go from a 4-inch pipe to a 6, back to a 4. So there may be some areas where it might not work as well. It is very expensive, time-consuming, and limited range because, again, you're working with 2 sensors, so one section of pipe at a time, and it is also a boots-on-the-ground method. So very time-consuming. Noise loggers, similar to that noise correlator, just over a larger area. So in this case, you're using 6 or more of those sensors, placing them on different locations on adjacent pipes. So now you're working on multiple stretches of pipe, potentially multiple streets. But it does basically the same thing. So it collects those signals, logs that data, and then it calculates the location based on the data. They typically perform this type of survey during the nighttime hours because you have limited background noise, right? So you're not getting as much interference from traffic or other utilities that might be running because hopefully everybody's asleep. Also non-invasive with minimal site prep, but again, as I said, very susceptible to those external noises. I will say, in speaking with one of my colleagues who attended the Data Collaborative conference a week or 2 ago, that they are trying to integrate AI with this method to try and filter out those external noises. So there are efforts to improve the accuracy, right? To eliminate some of those sensitivities that these different technologies have. And that kind of goes for all of these different methods that we're talking about. Is I would expect to see the accuracy improve over time as they come up with newer, better ways to eliminate those limitations and those sensitivities. Moving on to our non-acoustic methods, the most basic method, the one that we use every single day, is the visual survey. This just involves folks out there, walking the streets, looking for any visible sign of leaks. So is there water bubbling up out of the ground? Is it muddy, as you can see in this photo? It's not just water, it's muddy water. Very accessible approach. Anybody can do it, not just our crews, but also our customers, right? We get calls all the time from our customers saying there's water running down the street. We think you might have a leak. Limited coverage, again, boots on the ground. It also leans heavily on the observational judgment of the person who's reporting the leak. So again, with this photo, you can see that the water's muddy. Typically, when a leak comes up through the ground, it's pulling sand up with it, right? So you're gonna see muddy water. If you see clear water running down the gutter, it's probably not a leak, which is why we ask a lot of questions when somebody does call in a leak so that we can determine the likelihood of it being a leak. Ground penetrating radar is another non-acoustic method. We actually have a couple of these devices. I think we have 2. We don't use them for leaks though. They're, I would say, full-time use already for other things. The way a GPR works for leak detection is that it emits electromagnetic waves into the ground, bounces off any anomalies and dielectric properties, and it sends that wave back to the surface. And you're gonna see that bounce back on the little screen like you can see this gentleman has in the photo. You'll see like a little peak in the case of a pipeline. in the case of a leak, you're likely to see what looks like a void in the soil, or the pipe may be appearing deeper than it should be. So that would be how you might use this device for leak detection. It does require a substantial amount of time and resources. Again, boots on the ground, you're basically pushing a lawnmower up and down the street to try and locate leaks, so it takes some time. You do need a certain amount of expertise to make this an effective tool and an accurate way of locating leaks, because you have to be able to select the right radio frequency for the soil type that you're working in. And I would say even within our own system, we do have different soil types depending on the area that you're in. So you really have to know how to use it. You got to be able to dial that equipment in to make this accurate. And then there's a possibility for false alarms. So you may get a reflection coming off of a metallic object or something in the ground, and it may not actually be a leak. Software-based technologies, pressure monitoring would be one of those. In this method, what they do is they install pressure monitors throughout the system at certain locations. That pressure monitor picks up any sudden drop in pressure, collects that data, sends it to the, I would say in this case would be our office via SCADA, and then you're able to track those pressure drops. This is really geared toward an area where you already know you have a problem, so you're not likely to install this technology throughout your whole system. You're likely to focus on an area that you know you have issues. Expensive, right, to get that equipment and get it set up. And this one applies to our area. I would say thermal expansion and contraction of the pipe can affect that pressure, which, as you all know, we have that problem here, right? Very wide swings in temperature that could affect the pressure. And then this is a technology that's not going to pinpoint the exact location of the leak. It's going to give you a general area, or this street, right, has an issue, but you're still going to have to go in with some sort of acoustic or non-acoustic survey to actually pinpoint that leak location. Emerging technologies, we have satellite-based technology. So this is a satellite survey, uses satellite radar to penetrate the first few meters of the Earth's surface, and it detects any underground moisture anomalies. The way it works is you can see those two photos on the bottom left and right of the screen. So the bottom left photo is what that satellite survey is going to send back. The little yellow dots are areas where they've identified moisture anomalies, where you might have a leak occurring. What they do once they generate that data is they'll take a GIS layer of your system and they'll overlay that over the anomalies to give you an idea of where within your system you may be having an issue. What I will say here is that the satellite survey itself, you're likely to do on your whole system, not just a small area. We did get a quote for this survey method a couple years ago, and at the time they told us at least 250 to 300 miles of pipe is what they would recommend. Our system's about 420 miles, so I would say if you were going to do it, you'd want to do the whole thing. It's quite expensive, and there's a reason for that. Back in 2022, when we were quoted for this work, it was around $120,000, and that's really a two-part quote. $50,000 of that is for the satellite survey itself. The other $70,000 is for the follow-up acoustic or non-acoustic ground survey that you're going to have to do. Because again, with this technology, it's not going to pinpoint the leak location for you. It's just going to tell you the areas of focus, right? So it's almost like a focusing technique. It's like, okay, here, area A, B, and C is where you have something going on. You need to do an acoustic survey or a non-acoustic survey in these areas. So it's not a standalone solution, right? It works complementary to one of those ground-based surveys. So what methods do we use here at Desert Water Agency? Really, we use three methods, two that we've used for a really long time, one that's fairly new. On an almost daily basis, I would say with certainty, we use those visual surveys and the listening sticks. Again, our crews for construction have those listening sticks outfitted on their trucks, and they use them whenever they have a leak that's surfaced. The acoustic survey, something again that's fairly new for us. We performed our first acoustic last year. Why do we use these methods? In the case of the visual surveys and the listening sticks, they're really easy to use. Very practical. listening sticks, the metal version, which you can see in this photo. So these are our guys out there in the field. The very long metal rod that he's using, that's what we use for listening sticks. Very basic, but it does the job. They've got it on all their trucks. So anytime a leak surfaces, they'll pull that guy out. Because as we know, water travels. And just because you see water bubbling up at point A, that doesn't mean that's where the hole is, right? It could be at point B, 50, 100 feet away. And so they'll take that stick, put ear to the ground, and they'll start following the pipe until they find where it's the loudest. And that's usually indicative of where that actual hole is. And because our guys use this every day, our guys and gals, our team, they're very skilled at using the visual survey, at using the listening sticks. In terms of the acoustic survey that we performed, we said we'd do it, right? So when we asked, as David said, when we asked for those changes to the default inputs to that model, we stated that we would start performing annual surveys on our system. And so this is just part of us complying with those state requirements and doing what we said we would do. Oh, too far. There we go. So why don't we use the other methods at this time? A lot of it has to do with cost, not just equipment cost. I mean, we could buy the equipment if we wanted to, and there's the upfront cost of that. But there's also the staff time that you have to consider. If you are really focusing on leak detection, it's pretty much a full-time job. It took 2 to 3 weeks for a 2-man crew to survey 42 miles of pipe in our system. So if you had one guy doing it, it would take longer. Not to mention all the other things that we have that would take them away from just doing that. If you were going to follow up and excavate, you would need a crew to do that, right? So there are a lot of things to consider if you're going to employ other methods. A lot of this equipment requires expertise, like I said. So if you want to use it, not just use it, but use it well and have it actually be accurate, that requires the person using it to know how to use it. And then for the bottom two, when we're talking about the pressure monitoring and the satellite, again, they're not standalone methods, so they're not going to tell you where the leaks are actually located. They're just going to tell you where to focus your other surveys. So we'll talk a little bit about the survey that we performed last year. Back in 2024, we hired a third-party consultant to perform that, I would say, pilot study acoustic survey on the first 10% of our system. They employed a number of different devices and methods during that survey, so they have all of this on their trucks. It just depends on what they find and what they use. So listening sticks, ground microphones, the sensors, and the noise correlators were all things that they used during that survey. The first 42 miles that we did, we really tried to get a representative sample of our system, so we didn't necessarily just focus on unlined steel. We tried to get a little bit of everything, just to kind of see how it worked. We did test the accuracy of the survey by trying to excavate and uncover those leaks once the survey was completed. There was the option for field training for some of our team members on how to use that equipment. So we did take advantage of that. Why not, right? They're here. We may as well get some practice and see how easy or difficult it is to use. And then again, we did this survey to comply with those state requirements that we said we would do. So here's some photos of our team out there with the eSource folks, learning how to use the different types of equipment. The pictures on the left-hand side are the various listening sticks that you can use. The top center photo is that ground microphone. So it's basically the listening stick with the amplifier. And then the bottom middle and the 2 photos on the right are those sensors and noise correlators that they use. They set them on 2 different locations to try to identify a leak. So what they did was they first went through with those listening sticks. If they thought they heard something, they put the sensors in and they tried to identify the location. Summary of the survey itself. The survey was $21,300. That's in 2023 dollars. That's when we received the initial proposal. The optional field training was an extra $1,700, so all told $23,000 is what we paid. The survey was on approximately 42 miles of our pipe. It took 2 to 3 weeks for a 2-man crew to complete that work. They did identify a few locations where they believed there were leaks occurring. And so as a test, we did go out and excavate those locations to try and find those leaks. And unfortunately, we were not able to do so. I will point out that the current acceptable accuracy of these methods is about 70%, which means that if they identify 10 leaks, you might find 7 if you actually dug them up. Not an exact science, but again, they are trying to find ways to improve the accuracy of all these different methods. So summary on our program and what we recommend moving forward. Again, we've evaluated different methods, some we already use, some that are new. Currently, we use that visual survey, listening sticks. Those are typically used in our case for leaks that have surfaced. Also, we've started employing the acoustic surveys. We performed our first acoustic survey last year. Unfortunately, didn't find any of the leaks that they identified during the survey, but we have committed to continuing on in those surveys on an annual basis. And what I would suggest, and I've talked to David about this, is moving forward, we shift the focus now to areas that we know are concerns, right? So we know we have unlined steel that's likely to have subsurface leaks. Let's focus the next round of surveys in those areas. So I think that's our plan moving forward. Recommendations as far as our future efforts. We've already identified areas that are prone to leaks through our existing methods and our GIS program. I know David gave you guys a presentation a few weeks ago on our system and the amount of unlined steel main that we have. The number one goal to be continuing to fund the pipeline replacement program. I know our limiting factor to this point has been staffing for design. We have budgeted for an additional engineering position that will help with that, help speed up those designs and really get those projects rolling. And the goal with future budgeting cycles would be to add additional construction funds with the ultimate goal of 2 projects per year once we get to that point. We do want to continue documenting leaks. So anytime we repair a leak report is generated. That information is plugged into our GIS program. They use that to prioritize which means we should replace. I would say that the information that we're starting to bring in from our leak detection survey should also be implemented and plugged into that GIS program as a way to help inform how we're prioritizing, because that adds the subsurface leak component, right? So now we're not just looking at surface, now we're starting to look at subsurface, as well as any other information that we may already have. Like maybe we're collecting SCADA information that we can use to help inform how we prioritize our leaks. So that's really interdepartmental. Let's talk about it. Let's see what we have that we already bring in that we can maybe use in this effort. And we have, in terms of documenting our leaks, also budgeted for an additional GIS staff member, which will help, which will help really push that GIS program forward and help us have that manpower to come up with even better ways of using that information. And I don't think I need to tell you guys this, but the most effective way to address water loss from old deteriorating pipes is to replace the pipe. I would say that's probably the most foolproof method, right, of water loss reduction. And at this time, I'll open it up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Director Gracia.
I read the whole thing. I don't have any questions. All I can say is I'm glad it's not my job to go out and find those leaks. Very complicated stuff.
All right. Director McKenna.
You mentioned in the preamble there was a state performance standard for leaks, but you didn't say what it was. For our size agency, what is that standard?
So our real loss performance standard is 69 gallons per connection per day. It would have been in the low 20s, I would say, but we requested those changes. And so that was an option that agencies had, which is great, and we took advantage of it. And
That's an
because of that,
acceptable, for the state, that's an acceptable
for our
level
system.
of leak.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is. It's
What
it's basically
percentage?
baseline.
What percentage of our water do you think we currently lose to leaks?
We produce, I want to say around 20. I want to say 20,000 acre feet, but I don't know if that's accurate. I know our water loss is around 2,000 acre feet,
Sorry,
plus
say
or
again?
minus. It's around 2,000 acre feet annually, which is where that number comes from. So if you were to take 69 gallons per connection per day, multiply it by the number of connections and turn it into acre
So
feet,
that's
that's about what you get.
What's that, 10%?
We can provide that. We just don't have the figure of how much we actually produce off the top of our heads, so doing the calculation, but we can definitely follow up with that.
Well, let's say it was 10%. It sounds like that's the ballpark. The treasurer's report we'll get later says we sold $4.7 million of revenue water last month. Just 10% of that is nearly $500,000. So when you say, and this is where I just disagree with the conclusions, and because so many of them are ruled out on the basis of cost. $120,000, oh, that's expensive. But $500,000 a month is a serious amount of money. I don't disagree. I agree, rather, that replacing the pipes is the best solution. I don't think we're doing that nearly fast enough. I think we should go at least twice as fast. I did a very unscientific study on leaks. I'm not going to read it into the record because it's so unscientific, but I took all of the streets mentioned in the last 3 general managers' report. I looked at all the leaks this year on those streets. I had 360 data points, and I found a peak at 70 to 75 years old. If they're less than 60 years old, they don't leak. If they're more than 80 years old, they're either not there anymore or they don't leak. If you replace at the current rate of replacement, that peak, it just moves. We would still be having the same number of leaks in 10 years' time as we have today, more or less. So we don't get ahead of the problem. I think we should take a serious look at the real cost of doing the entire system survey, satellite, ground penetrating radar, whatever. I just don't think we're doing enough to handle this problem. That's what I say.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the update.
Thank you. And Vice President Bowman?
Yes, thank you for a thorough update and giving us an idea of how we go about detecting the leaks. Director McKenna, your data points are amazing, and I hope the staff will look into it, either confirm or adjust some of the suggestions that Director McKenna put forth.
Thank you. I too am, and just again, this your sort of unscientific back of the envelope, however you want to call it, survey is something I hope we can revisit with more accurate data at a future meeting. But it does really beg the question: if we potentially are losing that much in revenue or unbilled water loss, does a survey and a follow-up survey and being more aggressive on our pipeline replacement really does it sort of pay for itself because of the revenue that we're not getting? Anyway, I think that's enough. We can move to the next
I have
slide.
one point I'd like to make.
What's that?
or One question or point. When we're talking about water loss, we're talking about water that it's not evaporating, it's returning to the aquifer. I think the only real loss is the electricity that we pay for to pump it. The numbers are a tiny bit skewed because we're not really losing that water. So it'd be good to know how much money in electricity we're paying. How much does that cost to pump his number, 500,000 gallons of water, I think would be more helpful.
Yes, Director Grasha, you are correct. It is not in the entire amount, but it is more than just the pumping. There's still other things that we do, such as chlorination, as well as paying a replenishment assessment charge. And those are the lost costs, but we do get kind of that non-consumptive return. And then we, of course, that is not essentially lost water, but that is lost revenue on that water, most definitely.
And
yeah.
we still get dinged by the state, is that right?
Dinged from the state as in what regard? So
They're saying that we need to, the amount of water that, for instance, non-functional turf,
Okay.
we actually are
Understood.
losing a percentage of that water.
Yeah.
But on this item, we're not really losing water, we're just losing money, and it's not nearly as dramatic as it sounded like a minute ago, but
I do believe your statement to be accurate. We have a couple different standards that we have to meet, one being the SB 555 that they were referring to, also making conservation a California way of life. And our current understanding of that regulation is that we are not penalized for the system losses.
Oh, good.
It is the making conservation a California way of life regulation is pinpointed specifically to the customer and their water use habits. And so these water loss figures have kind of been backed out of that. And so the improvements that we do not see an equal reduction in our targets. So it's backed out of that calculation now, but we do have other standards that we have to meet as far as that non-revenue water.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Director McKenna, you had another question?
Director Grassley is correct. Of course, the water round trips back into the aquifer. But even if the only cost we had was pumping it, even if only cost was Edison, it's still about $30,000 a month. And these are not small sums of money. This is a lot of money.
All right. If there's nothing else, we can move to our item 9, which is our Secretary Treasurer's report.
In our operating fund, we received I'll start over. Financial highlights for July 2025. In the operating fund, we received $4,714,270 in water sales revenue receipts and $178,189 in recycled water sales revenue receipts, $62,560 in construction deposits from 4 different projects, $116,976 included in miscellaneous receipts for Mission Creek expense reimbursement from CVWD. We paid $5,189,760 in accounts payable. Year-to-date water sales are 2% over budget. Year-to-date total revenues are 2% over budget, and year-to-date total expenses are 20% under budget. For active potable water services, there were 23,800 active services in July, and compared to 23,736 active services billed in June. So we had a net increase of 64 active services. Account disconnections for non-payment. There were 32 water accounts turned off for non-payment in July. Over the past 12 months, an average of 30 accounts per month have been turned off for non-payment, and that's about a 1.5% annual disconnection rate. In the general fund, we received $399,097 in property taxes, $48,896 in replenishment assessments, and that was all from private pumpers. $56,681 in SCE Whitewater Hydro. And we paid $3,752,648 in state water project charges. And in the wastewater fund, we received $157,598 in operating fund reimbursements. We paid $0 in accounts payable. Active sewer accounts, there were 2,294 in July, and that's compared to 2,252 in June. So that's an increase of 42 active services. What area was that in? 42 new sewer accounts?
It was the Dream Homes area.
Oh, okay.
Acina, I'm sorry.
In where?
Acina.
Oh, Acina. Okay. I was like, that's a lot of brand new sewer services. And that concludes the report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our Secretary Treasurer? No? All right, we'll move on to the General Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Okay. So for the general manager report, we have a Sites Reservoir WISIP funding update. On August 20th, the California Water Commission held a water storage investment program, otherwise known as the WISIP program, hearing to determine how to reallocate funding that was made available by the Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion project being withdrawn from the WISIP program. And also because of funding available from the passage of Proposition 4, which is otherwise known as the Safe Drinking Water, Wildfire Prevention, Drought Preparedness, and Clean Air Act of 2024. Agency staff attended that California Water Commission hearing and provided oral comments highlighting the essential nature of the agency's imported water supplies and the importance of the Sites Reservoir, which will provide an additional water source to the agency and in order to increase and diversify our water supply portfolio. The commission unanimously voted to increase the amount of funding available to 3 of the 5 projects under consideration, one of which was Sites Reservoir. The other 2 projects did not receive additional funding because they have failed to show comparable progress towards completion, the program requirement, so therefore they did not receive additional funding at this time. This additional funding will offset some of the inflation that has occurred since the Sites Reservoir originally applied for the WISIP funds. So in total, the Sites Reservoir, for this instance, the Sites Reservoir received $219 million in WISIP funding, and that brings us to a total of $1.1 billion to date. This additional funding is evidence to the confidence in the projects and its ability to be constructed. Since the writing of this report, I have been informed that there is one more project that has fallen out of the program and will not be moving forward. This is the Pachenko project, which can potentially lead to an additional $200,000 for the sites project. So, or actually, I think 200 million, not 200,000. I apologize for that. Okay, moving on to the Paris Dam Seepage Recovery Project update. A while back, this board had requested an update on the Paris Dam Seepage Recovery Project. And while we haven't provided that yet, there was a specific reason because Metropolitan Water District was evaluating whether they would be able to move forward with the project or not. And they wanted us to hold off publicly discussing a status update on the project until they had time to confer with their management. And now they have, we've kind of gotten the green light to move forward as they've notified DWR of their intent. So the purpose of the Paris Dam Seepage Recovery Project, as a reminder, was to extract seepage loss from groundwater and deliver it to the Colorado River Aqueduct. So this is water that was seeping underneath and around the dam that was kind of a little bit more excessive than what would be normally expected and was infiltrating into the groundwater sources there. So the original project concept included a recovery system that comprised of 5 extraction wells and pumps to recover that seepage recovery water and 3,500 linear feet of conveyance pipeline connecting those extraction facilities to the Colorado River Aqueduct. Back in 2021, the estimate was about $33.4 million in order to complete the project, and DWA, CVWD, and Metropolitan were all identified as partners within this project. And of course, Metropolitan having the majority share of 63.3%, and DWA just a minor portion of 4.37. This was based off of our Table A water, that state water project allotments that are in the reservoir, so that's how it was determined to split that up, our participating shares. On April 20th, 2021, this board of directors authorized staff to enter into a funding agreement with the Department of Water Resources for the cost of the environmental analysis, the planning and design of the Paris Dam Seepage Recovery Project. So we committed to $549,000 at that point in time, and that was billed through our annual statement of charges back in 2022. Since that time, Metropolitan has been collaborating closely with the Department of Water Resources and its consultants on groundwater modeling and to answer questions raised during the environmental review process. And now, due to new regulations over certain contaminants, there has been considerable change regarding the project. And so due to the divergence in the original understanding and scope of the project, because it has changed since the original conception through working with DWR, the groundwater modeling results, Metropolitan has decided not to continue participating in the Paris Dam Seepage Recovery Project. Metropolitan has discussed the reasonings with Desert Water staff and CVWD staff, and we are in agreement with Metropolitan's position on the project and believe it should not be constructed. Of concern are the impacts to the project will have on the newly regulated constituents in the groundwater and the impacts the project will have on their migration, creating liability risks for these impacts to the participating agencies. Metropolitan has formally notified the Department of Water Resources of their decision, and Metropolitan, DWA, and CVWD will engage with DWR regarding the remaining unused planning funds. At last calculation, the remaining funding that had not been used of DWA's contributed funds is approximately $100,000, but these figures will need to be finalized as there may be some outstanding costs still. Moving on to our storm damage at the Chino West Diversion. Back on August 25th, a severe thunderstorm warning was issued by the National Weather Service for the Coachella Valley. Rain from that thunderstorm destroyed a portion of the Chino West Diversion and appurtenant structures. The Chino West Diversion, that is the intake and the diversion off of Chino Creek that serves the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway. And it consists of a surface water intake as well as a subsurface water intake. The above ground piping and valving, it also has a below ground piping and piping and valving, along with a elevated walkway to access the facilities, as it's quite a rugged terrain to get up there. The storm impacted the diversion by removing the surface water intake, the above ground piping and valving, and the elevated walkway. It also recontoured the grade above the subsurface intake, burying it and eroding the road leading to the diversion. Staff has been in the process of evaluating the situation. We are continuing to evaluate the situation as it seems to be changing from day to day as we seem to have another storm rolling in. So we will be continuing to evaluate that to see what the best path forward will be for reconstruction. We do still have water flowing from the subsurface intake, a sufficient amount, and we have been performing this report was written last week, and this is kind of an evolving situation. We were waiting at this time that this report was written for the bacteriological testing to come back, and it since has come back below the required level. So the capability was to be able to turn back in and fill the reservoir at the base station of the Palm Springs tram. However, even though it was the bacteriological testing came back below, there was still some other water quality measures that just were not quite up to our standards, such as color and turbidity. And so we chose to take that back out, and we began trucking water to that reservoir from the base system here on Saturday to get them through the holiday weekend. We were able to sufficiently fill that reservoir up so they had enough capacity to be able to use. We've been in contact with the staff at the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway, and they are regulating their water consumption there to just stretch the water as far as possible so we can get that subsurface diversion turned back in. We're continuing to test that. It is unknown whether they would, at last conversation, whether they'd even be opening today because of the storms that are kind of rolling in at the moment. But they are planning on closing down, I believe, here by next week for their annual maintenance period. So if we are unable to turn back that subsurface, we have just a limited amount of time that we'll be able to get them through. But we are working on a design to be able to reconstruct the surface intake and wait until kind of the turbidity and the color of the subsurface intake gets back into line where we want to see it to be able to get them back up to full speed. So we are operational, and they still have water supply. There's a few pictures up here. The intake on the pre-storm to the right, you can see that there's that green pipe, and then there's a concrete block that it goes through, and that kind of holds it in place. Well, in the middle of the left side of the screen, you can see the little bit of the concrete block left with a little bit of a hole in it, and that's kind of all that's left of that. So it was pretty substantial, the flow that came down and the debris that came down to wipe that out, which is consistent with what we've seen in other severe storms. And just because of the terrain and what we're dealing with up there, it washes it out. We reconstruct it within a week, and we're good to go. And then the elevated pathway, you can see down the bottom, is kind of all buried and kind of bangled up the railing there. So that's what had happened, and we will continue to evaluate what is happening up there if there's any further impacts after today, and evaluating with our engineering staff on how to reconstruct that best and to be more resilient, if possible, but also keeping in mind the nature of the terrain that we're dealing with. Moving on to the leak report. Over the last 2 weeks, since the last leak report, we had 21 leaks. And if you look on here, there are a couple roads, the Sharon and the Mountain View. Those were all kind of single incident, but multiple leaks at one location. And overall, for those 21 leaks, we spent 127.5 man-hours repairing them. And I'd like to pass it off to our Director of Public Affairs and Conservations for a highlight of her meetings and events.
Thank you, General Manager Sines. Good morning, President Ortega, members of the board. Just want to quickly highlight some activities during the month of August. As you'll see, there were quite a few related to the website RFP that is going on. And so including 3 demos and interviews. We should be very close to selecting soon, and we'll have an update on that for the next General Manager's report. Additionally, there were a few legislative meetings, Desert Valley Builders Association, CSDA, Aqua Legislative Committees. Additionally, President Ortega mentioned this at the last board meeting, but we did have a briefing with Assemblymember Wallace on making conservation a California way of life regulation, and it's our hope to do the same with Senator Rosalicio Choa Bogue once the session finishes in a couple of weeks here. And we're discussing if we want to do the same with Assemblymember Gonzalez due to the fact that his boundaries really just overlap some of our jurisdictional versus our service area. And then additionally, I attended Assemblymember Gonzalez's new office opening at the end of, a couple of weeks ago actually in August, and then attended the CSDA annual conference last week. Thank you.
Okay, and now moving on to my meetings and activities. I was able to enjoy a vacation of moving in children into college, so I don't know that was a vacation or not. It was very busy, but now I'm back. During that time, we, on the 21st, I did attend a site's legislative meeting. Just timing didn't work out, but that was a priority meeting, so I did take some time off in the middle of there to attend that. On August 26th, we had a meeting for the State Water Contracts Protest Item Settlement Caucus. And this is something, just to have a little reminder what this is so annually we've been signing this kind of tolling agreement, and we have had several outstanding protest items along with all of the other state water contractors with DWR regarding the billing of our statement of charges for the state water project. And about 50 plus items that were on that list were unable to be resolved based off of the accounting system and everything that they had in place. Now, the DWR has spent several years, and I'm sure several $1 million, updating their accounting and billing and project cost tracking systems and debt management tracking systems. And we are now at a place where we're starting to receive the updated information. So we are not at a place where this is still, will come to likely come to a settlement. So we are now finally receiving the information to be able to have the discussion. So that's just an update on that. And on August 26th, also had a meeting internally here with regards to our emergency response planning and coordination to really bolster up our planning process and our documentation of what the agency does in emergencies. So we're kicking that off, and that will be an agency-wide effort over the course of several months, getting all the way down to tabletop exercises. And another highlight is on August 28th, Assistant General Manager, Chief Engineer Tate and I, we had met with Mojave Water District and CVWD. So we have some facilities out at the Hesperia turnout. And when the project was originally constructed, DWA had purchased for a very low sum in comparison to what it would cost us today, a turnout for the eventual construction of that route into the valley if it were to be constructed. And so it is sitting there, and so they are interested in potentially using that for a project that they have. And so we met with them to find out what they were looking at. And so we will be meeting with them in the future as to further discuss, and we'll be bringing that item to the board if something comes of it. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions with regards to the general manager's report.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
Just curiosity, you mentioned that we trucked water up to the reservoir for the tram, is that right?
We did on Saturday. We trucked up water to the reservoir to make sure that they had sufficient supplies to get them through the holiday weekend.
And as I understand it, this was from information that I gleaned few years ago, that we have one truck that's capable of doing that. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And CVWD, I believe, has one as well. Is that right? I don't know if they have
I'm
one.
not sure what their capabilities are.
I think they had one then. I don't know if they, so my understanding is that there might be two in the valley.
Okay.
We loaned that truck to MSWD at one point when they had trouble. And as you go through your process of life, maybe you could ask yourselves if one is enough, I guess is what I'm not saying that we need two, but as I recall, MSWD put it on their budget and then it kind of disappeared. I don't know if it disappeared because they bought one, but I don't think two is enough for the valley. If it's ever needed, two's not going to be enough. I guess that's what I'm saying. Beyond one reservoir being a little low, you know what I mean?
To add to that, the city of Los Angeles recently had an event where they're out of water for a couple of weeks, and started thinking about emergency services. And that's something we're looking into now. We found a company out of Santa Barbara that provides potable water trucking services, like water tenders, trailers with washing machines,
Right.
shower services, stuff like that. So that's something we're going to look into, see if we can maybe get a contract with them, and maybe even look at one in Phoenix and try to get something outside the valley. So if we do an emergency, we can pull in some of those resources. So it's something we've been thinking about.
Well, one of the things that crossed my mind is ours, as I recall, was a pretty late model vehicle, pretty new, and probably perfectly capable. But making that run up that hill is pretty rough business.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway.
Yeah, that's something we can't continue for an extended period of time.
Yeah, well,
It's-
and you know, the truck's going to get, anyway. But thank you for the report, very good. And the other thing on that was, yeah, that was it. The other one was just in case it came up, so.
All right. Director McKenna?
I was struck by the tramway issue as well. That's the second time I've seen this thing destroyed. Right, and I haven't been here that long. And also, there's no vehicle access to where it is, so it's a hand dig when somebody goes up there to fix it. I'm wondering, when you look at how to, come up with a permanent solution, maybe it should be relocated to somewhere you can get at it easier. Just a thought.
So a couple thoughts on that. This disturbance is relatively new. As of 2019, the Valentine's Day storm in 2019 was the first incident, and it really rearranged that canyon up there. It destroyed our Chino North diversion. It significantly impaired the Chino West, the tram one that we're speaking about. And ever since then, it seems like every storm we have brings down more rock and more debris. And we're talking rock and debris. It's not rocks, it's boulders the size of Volkswagens rolling down the mountain. And the thought of us building something that's strong enough to withstand that and then not get clogged up by it is something we're thinking about. And what is the benefit of building something very indestructible up there? And if it gets clogged up, then you have to deal with the device or the structure you put in plus the clogging behind it. So it's a really challenging situation
Maybe
up there.
drill them a well.
That's where we have the infiltration gallery. That's what's supplying us currently. So we're relying on that quite heavily. And some other things we've done is try to add water into the infiltration gallery, in the sense that we build shallow ponds up there to get whatever water is available to percolate into the ground and recover through the infiltration gallery. So,
Well, you're the experts. Leave it to you.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
I had a question on the Paris Dam seepage project. So all the construction and everything that was done years before that was part of all the same project, correct?
I believe there was two.
I mean,
So
we
there was
got
original
reports on it, like,
construction.
every.
that was to
meeting.
reinforce the base of the dam.
Okay, so that
was
was-
seismic constraints or concerns.
But we participated financially in that as well, correct?
Yeah, we participate in the reservoir itself. So, we're charged by, because that is a state water project facility, therefore we are charged for it. So the original construction, we bear costs for that, as well as what you're referencing, the seismic updates to it, that we would also participate in, because it is a state facility. This is something that is separate, that is not, that would be just for the 3 participants that we're looking into it.
Yeah, so that was all just like basically like pre-construction to get ready for this phase.
The
Seismic, all that stuff.
That was
happened.
reinforcing the bottom of the dam. In the event you had a seismic event, they were concerned that the dam would just jiggle loose and blow out.
Yeah.
And this added a bunch of material at the bottom of the dam. If you go out there now, it's probably twice the width that it used to be.
Yeah.
So to
It was
keep-
just also called Parridge Seepage Project or whatever when they were doing the construction, so that's why I was confused.
Okay.
It was all under the same name.
Okay, this is specific. There has been no construction done on this project yet. And this project is specifically for the drilling of those wells and equipping of them, and then building the conveyance capacity to get that to the California Aqueduct for delivery. So there's only been planning done on this so far.
Okay.
Yeah, there are 2 separate projects going on up there. We were part of both, I guess, but one
Yeah.
more than the other, and that
Yeah.
one went away. Is that right?
So there'd be 3. There'd be the seismic retrofitting of the dam, the seepage project, and now they're doing the overflow. They never designed an emergency overflow for the dam, so they're currently constructing that now, and there's a bunch of legal challenges that they finally worked through, so they're, in the next few months, they're gonna be working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Vice President Bowman?
None from me.
Okay, and nothing from me. So we can go to our next action item. Director's reports on meetings and events attended on behalf of the agency. If each board member could report out on what compensable events or meetings or events that they attended since the last board meeting 2 weeks ago, and provide the date of the meeting or event. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
So going back to our last meeting on the 19th, I attended the Urban Water Conference, which was on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And I believe that's the only events that I participated in during that time. I just want to say that that particular event was very, very good in my estimation, and well worth the, at least for me, the attendance. Got lots more broad perspective than we've ever had at any of those events. It was very, I think, very, very, very good for me anyway. I hope you all got something out of that.
All
That's
right.
it.
Director McKenna.
My only outside meeting, excuse me, was Urban Water Institute conference in San Diego on August 20th, 21st, and 22nd. What stood out for me was the keynote speaker from the Environmental Protection Agency. He spent some time defending the indefensible. I mean, he spoke at length, actually. One of the points he made was that the new administration wants to devolve decision-making down to the lowest possible level, a concept known in government as subsidiarity. But he did not defend how the EPA is overruling California's own regulations. Seems to conflict with his idea. It was interesting to hear, but it was also an unfortunate presentation, I thought.
All right. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
I participated in an Aqua webinar. I was one of the regions, and I'm forgetting which number it was, on August 20th. And they were talking about grant funding and how important it is to maintain relationships with all your representatives, statewide and federally. It really helps when you're applying for, earmark projects or grants through the different federal agencies. So it was very interesting. And then I was at the CSDA annual conference, August 24th through the 28th. And some highlights were I attended the chapter leaders meeting on that Monday afternoon, and there was a big focus on special districts and their relationships with their LAFCOs. And there are some LAFCOs that still don't have special district representation. Not Riverside County does, but some LAFCOs do not. So there was a big push, the different chapters were trying to work to get that representation. And CSDA also was explaining that they can support special districts on their LAFCOs with, information and things. And I just recently, I think they were in a big support of the special district legislation or rule that was going to come up regarding in front of LAFCO. So that was good to hear from all the different chapters throughout the state of California and all the different special districts. I also went to a session that was good on positive, productive, and fun workshops with the public or workshops with staff. So that was interesting. And then I went to another one on how to control disruptive public meetings, which was interesting. And there were some very good stories and situational things that different people shared. So that was good. And then another good part about CSDA, in their app, you can go on, because they have so many different sessions, you can go on and review any of their presentations after the fact. So, and then on August 31st, I did my tech training Know Before You Go thing, and that's it.
All right. Thank you, Vice President Bowman.
Yes, I've mentioned it before that CSDA is my favorite conference to attend. I always come away with ideas and thoughts regarding our district and also, how to be a better human, personal life kind of things. As mentioned by Director Bloomer, their app was fantastic. You can drill down to every presenter and their PowerPoint presentation. It's very robust, and if Aqua is listening to us, make your app like CSDA's would be my point. They had a speaker, Joe Theismann, who was a former NFL leader, and he was so amazingly entertaining and spoke to the heart of everybody there. I enjoyed that one thoroughly. One of the workshops, here's a highlight of a few I went to, most common legal questions for special districts. Things like the Brown Act, things like public records request, and things of that sort were discussed. Another one was navigating AI. You might remember last year, the year before, I came back all excited about the presenter for AI. And this particular presenter did a similar thing for me. He elevated my awareness of how important AI is and getting a handle on it now as individuals and as a district. It was phenomenal. Brett Ives, some of you know that name. I think he helped our board manual. Does anybody remember that? Was he instrumental in helping us with our board manual? Yeah, I think I saw his name. Anyway, I've enjoyed his presentations every year. He had one entitled Red Flag, Handling Rogue Board Members. And like yours, Director Bloomer, there was lots of discussion on how to handle board members that really could be better focused on their job instead of other things. And the topic that came up the most in that discussion was censuring. And we, in our handbook, we mentioned censuring on page 22, but we don't have a policy of what it's all about, how long a censure may last, and what are the impacts for a board member that may be censured. And I would recommend that we look at that and beef it up. And if you would like to see what Ives put together on that, I have it for you. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to MSWD because they were there in mass with all their directors and staff, and they got the platinum level of transparency. I forget the exact title of the award, but that they have been there presenting themselves, learning about what it's all about, and they went from the gold to the platinum level. And their GM got also a couple of awards, so it was really cool. And that's all I have.
Thank you. So I attended two conferences since our last time here. The first being the Urban Water Institute on August 20th, 21st, and 22nd. One of the presentations that I found most interesting, or quite interesting, was on the response to the wildfires in Los Angeles, particularly with a focus on Altadena and that community. The number of what they call mutual water companies, I think, is that what they're called? Yeah, mutual water companies that operate in that community. I was actually quite surprised. I think there were like 4 or 5 of them, and the challenges that they're facing, or any water agency would face, regardless of what their actual status is, in recovering from a situation like that, a disaster like that. But even some of the more specific challenges that they've encountered, because of their small sizes typically, and because they are owned by their members, and there's some bias apparently in emergency funding, grants and that sort of thing as it relates to publicly, that may focus more on public agencies like ours as opposed to those that are mutually owned. And also in that same presentation, was actually, that was this one group of there was one speaker who spoke to that. There was another speaker who presented he represents a nonprofit that has been developing an app called Watch Duty, which apparently everybody in the room started downloading the app while he was giving the presentation because it was quite intriguing. Their focus is on wildfires as well, but now they're looking at other types of natural disaster emergencies, and they're taking public, all this kind of information that's out on social media, as well as what's being put out by government agencies as it relates to particular wildfire situations. And they're basically verifying it, and also they have what they call reporters. So they have apparently 300 reporters in the United States who go through all this information and then send it out through the app to those who have access to the app to talk about to basically give them really concrete, verified information about what's happening, where the evacuation zones are, and the benefit to water agencies would be that they could overlap that with their own network to see where potentially some of our structures and resources might be at risk during some of these wildfire situations. So that was kind of interesting. I did too download the app and have been notified many times already about wildfires in Southern California, most of them that luckily have not turned into anything significant since then. And then on the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, I was also in Monterey for for CSDA, and one of the presentations that stood out for me, and again, I'll echo what the other two directors who were there with me say about the app for CSDA. And what I appreciate is the fact that you can actually download the presentation even while you're in the room and look at it on your phone while you're in the room if you can't really see it from far away. And then obviously send that to yourself and keep it for future information. But the presentation that I found particularly interesting that time was about a very small water district up in Murphys, California, called Union Public Utility District. And it's a community with about 1,600 customers. It used to be a mining town, and so the water system there was really designed for mining operations back in the 1860s and 70s. And in fact, they still use some of the same sluices that were developed back in that time to bring water into the town, which I found fascinating because they obviously have, they have a lot of wear and tear on them, and so there's a constant need to keep supporting the infrastructure that is quite old at this point, much older than what we have in our own network. But the focus was really on a rate study that they had done a few years ago, and then a Prop 218 process that, and this is a very tight community. Everybody knows each other. They're all, it's a town mostly of Italian immigrants, and they've been there a really long time. And this woman who was the general manager who was giving the presentation, her great-grandfather had been the man who went out and repaired these facilities back in whatever. So it's a very small town, and she came back and took on this job right after they had done this rate study and had the 218 process and raised the rates, and it really tore the town apart because there was a component of irrigation water that was where the costs rose, had not been increased in about 50 years, and suddenly they were being hit with a really high charge. So kind of tore the town apart. Apparently people would stop her parents in the street, ask her what she was going to do about it because she had just taken this job. And her whole story was really what she did in the small town to sort of bring it back together around this, because water being so important to the town and such a part of its history, and the kind of different community things that she organized, as well as essentially going through another rate study again, which this time the town felt that they got to participate in a way that apparently they didn't before. And even though the rates basically didn't change, but the legal challenges and protests that had evolved out of this conflict have now sort of gone away. So it was a sort of an interesting case study on how to engage the community more. And again, when you're in a small community, you don't need a whole lot of no votes to stop something from happening, which apparently happened in this particular case. So I thought that was a more in when we approach a rate study in the future, as we most likely will. So with that, I think we can move on to our director's comments and requests. Director Gracia.
Thank you. I got a couple updates. You'll remember our last meeting, I believe, or 2 meetings ago, I had mentioned my concern about the non-functional turf issue and how it might affect condominium owners in our community. I made the same comments at the WU meeting, which was a couple of days after our meeting. And since then, the Bureau of Reclamation has made available just under $100 million in grant money to the Metropolitan Water District. And MWD has now, I think this is somehow water industry-wide, determined that HOAs are now considered businesses and that they're not residential. And if you look at their statement, that rebate of $7 a square foot now, not $3, but they took it to $7 because I guess they realized, I don't know if it was as a result of my comments, but they were clearly made to be concerned about what went on. The state of California kicked in somewhere close to $30 million right after that as well. I don't know if that money is going to be available to us or if there is a pool of money in addition to what they got that we might be able to access. But I think that it is important for us to at least use that as a, give us a direction, if you will, and in the way that we might be able to address these issues and protect people and their homes. An update further on the issue at Mission Lakes Country Club. Of course, I mentioned their primary well failed, and since then their secondary well has failed, and currently are receiving all water for the golf course from Mission Springs Water District. I don't know how much that is, but generally speaking, a golf course uses about 1 million gallons a day. In a conversation I had with their general manager at the Urban Water Institute, it was explained to me that they had plenty of reserve capacity to meet those obligations. Then it was also made clear that that reserve capacity meant that they had to turn on wells that are overly contaminated with chromium-6. So they've the entire community now is once again drinking contaminated water so that the golf course can stay green. And that's the agency that won the award from the community, whatever that group is you guys love so much. I'm sure that they will be out there bragging about that award, while at the same time, everybody in the community is drinking water that is contaminated so that Mission Lakes Country Club can have water for their golf course. And just as a baseline, that makes them the worst human beings alive.
All right, thank you very much. Can we move on, Director McKenna?
Just a correction to what Director Gracia said, that the water that Mission Springs is currently providing is not contaminated. It meets all state standards, just so that we get the record straight.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer
Didn't hear
Bloomer,
you.
No comments or requests.
Not
Vice President Bowman.
One of the speakers at the CSDA, I made a note here, said as we as board gather and as we do the people's business, representing the people that elected us, one of the overarching things in his particular presentation, he said, package your passion so it can be understood. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to learn. Package it in a way, I mean, we all have our beliefs and our thoughts, but package it in a way that it will be received. And that certainly is my goal, to do the people's business, advancing the mission of Desert Water Agency, and to do it in a way that it can be understood. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing further to add. So we will be going into closed session in 10 minutes. It's 9:30. If we could meet at 9:40, please. Thank you.
Mr. President, if you don't mind, I'd like to correct the record on an
Can
issue.
we actually, yes.
Council Chair.
We're going to close the meeting now, and you can correct the record next time. So I can say that we have nothing from closed session to report, and with that, I'm adjourning the meeting. Thank you.